to record. Oh, you one step ahead. Okay, so hello officially everyone. Welcome to today's online event brought to you by Matchboard in partnership with GSN and Genesys. This event is entitled Differentiated Customer Experience, a Global Perspective for Financial Services, and it will run for 1 hour. During this time, we hope to inform you about the latest CX trends in financial services from both the global and the local Australian perspective. We'll have 2 presentations, and we'll hear from David Porter and Paul Jones at Genesys, as well as Richard Fink at GSN. This will be followed by Q&A, so think of your questions as we go along, and you can enter them at any time in the chat room. Very important, we'll be giving away a bottle of champagne to the best audience question as judged by our esteemed sponsor, just in time for holiday celebrations. So I'm Sharon Melamed, Managing Director at Matchboard. I'll shortly introduce our first speaker. Just before I do, and while we're waiting for a few more, some quick housekeeping. Firstly, we are recording this event. Secondly, if you have internet issues at any point, you can dial in with the phone number and passcode, which you'll find in the calendar invitation. And finally, could I just ask you to stay on mute to prevent outside noise for the speakers? And now to our first speaker, David Porter. David is Managing Director of Financial Services at Genesys, joining us today live from New York City. I'm sure the brand Genesys is familiar to most of you. They're a market leader in contact center and CX technology. Over to you, David.
Thank you, Sharon, and good afternoon, everybody. I trust the weather's nice. It's super cold here. Looks like it's about to snow. Let's get into the presentation. Let me first of all do the fabulous share screen. Hopefully everyone can see this. And then let me just give 2 seconds of backdrop before I start just talking through some pages and give some insights. First of all, 2 seconds of my background. I joined Genesys earlier this year to lead our financial services vertical. Prior to this, my whole career has been financial services. The last 12 years running different businesses at JP Chase, and before that, many years at American Express and at Lloyd's. So it's all I've ever done. Now you might say, well, why leave financial services to kind of move over into a technology company? Well, first of all, verticalization isn't really a word in the English language, but it is something that we hear at Genesys quite a lot, because Genesys has just got to the point of size and scale where they start to go vertical. That's just what happens. Obviously, financial services is key to this company. And just knowing from a decision maker standpoint, you know, what makes people tick, people's goals, objectives, key kind of pain points in decision making, it just seemed like a good fit. Secondly, obviously, if your company's objective and the kind of primary raison d'etre is remote client connectivity technology, it's a really good time to be in this business. We were just talking about, you know, being in the business travel airline space, not such a good business. So there's a good reason to be here at Genesys right now. So that's just some backdrop. And what we're going to do is I'm going to go through some pages just setting the scene in terms of in the client experience, technology change, adoption needs. So just the general landscape. And then I'll kind of pivot to, well, what are we doing about it?
David, sorry to interrupt you. The mode that you've got the presentation on shows your speaker notes and it's not the slide presentation mode.
Hold on 1 second. Let's stop that. Yep.
Yeah, sorry, I just thought jump in.
Let's do something else. Let's do that. Let's do that. Minimize the speaker notes there. There we go. Share. Let's do that. So there's always something. Is this working for folks?
Perfect.
Are we good? Yep, thumbs up. All right, fabulous. Well, with that, let's take it away. So I thought I would start with a spotlight to open up with, in this case, a spotlight on my mother. So just a couple of years ago, on the left of this page is her communication vehicle of choice. Well, she had an iPad, she just didn't use any of the stuff that she had available. Now, if you fast forward just 2 years, now she's Googling foreign language classes, she's monitoring her health with an Apple Watch, she's shopping online for everything, she's even texting me. So things have changed really fast. Now, it's not just, of course, change for my mother, but for all of us. And we know that the last 2 years has seen incredible change, and that pandemic-driven shift in all of our lives has changed buying behaviors, has changed working models and priorities. Now, in financial services, the response has been fresh priorities for technology, a renewed focus on CX, and new decision makers emerging. Luckily, the industry around the world is largely operating from a position of recent stability and strength. So the infrastructure investments to at least meet the needs that people have in this space has largely been made. Just to give that kind of a proof point, if you think to yourself, well, how has the pandemic changed my everyday financial services life in terms of paying an insurance bill, transferring money, checking an account balance? My guess would be it probably hasn't really changed at all. Of course, that's a function of investments that financial services companies have made in this space over the last 12 years. So that kind of sets the scene in terms of where things are at today. Before we get too deep into any of these particular areas, let me just touch on Genesys. For those of you that do not know us, we are a global client connectivity technology company, and we're a market leader in this space. And we've been 100% focused on CX, particularly in financial services, for over 30 years. And in fact, over 60% of the world's 100 most valuable brands count on us to deliver client experiences. And here's a few of them on the page. You put these brands together with our other 11,000 plus clients, that puts us at the center of managing over 70 billion consumer interactions in a year. So quite a lot. And just to double click into financial services, over 1,000 banks around the world actually use our technology to deliver their client experiences through contact centers, digital, other new emerging innovations, etc. So financial services is it's a key vertical for us. It's our largest vertical, and it's where we're investing a ton of innovation and calories in the development space today. Now, to kind of set a broader scene, now that we've kind of covered Genesys, here's a few quotes from consultants to kick us off. And these are gathered from Accenture, Bain & Company, etc., just over the last few weeks. And they're all pretty consistent in their message, right? Reimagine what's possible, act like digital giants, become a financial ally. And of course, they're all completely right. But to humanize this a little, think about what's actually happening today within, say, a consumer financial services channel. Kind of teller volumes would be down 10%, ATM volumes down 5%, dot volumes all flat. Where's all the volume gone? Well, it's gone to mobile. And people are using the quick deposit, quick pay, quick quote apps to figure out an insurance claim, balance checking, self-serve trading. They're doing all of these things for themselves, and they want more. Now, last week, somebody asked me, what are the key focus areas in financial services around the world right now? So rather than just make that up, I actually just wrote down, well, here's the most recent feedback that I've heard over the last week and a half. And I'll just touch on this for a second because I thought it was kind of interesting in terms of priorities, and the different markets are at different stages. But at the top of the page, the thing that really came out the most, and I heard the most, and I just quoted Marianne Lake from JP Morgan Chase. She runs the consumer businesses there. And she basically said, look, I mean, financial services companies, big ones, have really good products, tremendous breadth, but we actually fall down when we think about the CX that we deliver. And that CX delivery is being redefined right now by fintechs and, frankly, non-financial services companies. So that's the biggest challenge that we face. People's everyday user experiences of technology are being shaped by non-financial services companies. And if you're the CEO or the president of a large financial institution, it's frustrating to see one of your kids opening up a new account on an app on their phone and know that you can't deliver that same ease of experience with your bank or your insurance company. or your wealth manager. It's just frustrating. So we'll get into that in a minute. Revenues and costs. This is a quote from an Italian insurance company. And the CEO said, look, we've invested so much in the digital space, and we know we can get cost savings. But the key for us is to get more revenue out of the investments. Like, what's the business model to get more revenue out? So that was interesting. Speed, there's a quote here from a chief innovation officer at a big German bank, like, we can't wait 3 years to deliver. Compliance and regulatory stuff hasn't changed. But then this was interesting, a CEO at a large bank here in the US said, look, never in my 40 years have I seen labor shortages at the level they're at right now. And he went on to say, how do we get the people? I just can't get the people. And he went on to actually say, look, I've interviewed 6 people, we've offered them different senior roles. Every single one of them hasn't accepted, they've taken jobs elsewhere. So there's tremendous competition for talent up and down the spectrum, which is just kind of interesting. So that's just what we're hearing from around the world today. This is a more general point for Genesys, and I just thought it was worth making, though. Who we deal with on a day-to-day basis within financial services companies is changing. So I thought it would be interesting to touch on illustrative personas, and I mean illustrative, of executives leading the change across technology, across service. So over on the right, we have Bill, and at Genesys, we know Bill pretty well. Bill and his peers, they've been key decision makers in shaping our offerings, pricing, servicing, etc. Now, Kelly, on the other hand, is new for us and for many of our other industry partners too. And she and her peers have these new, incredibly exciting roles, working across the enterprise, driving both change and opportunity. So that's basically kind of a snapshot of what's changing. Let me flick the page over and talk about some of the changes in demand that we're also seeing. And it means that many of the things that we're being asked to think about are changing. And traditionally, we might have been asked to talk about and deliver case studies that demonstrate changes in average handle time in the call center, show us first call resolution rate, show us how you impact cost. Now we're being brought into much deeper strategies around advisor effectiveness, end-to-end client journey mapping, things like that. That's really kind of, for us right now, the hotspot of where we're being asked to deliver kind of ideas, insight, and innovation. So it's just changing. Onward to some numbers. So this is global financial services contact volume that we put together with Gartner. Now, it's interesting, in these days of digitally enabled self-service, you can note that actual kind of institution and client contact is growing really rapidly, which you might not expect if you think about self-serve. What's changing, though, is the channel. So, for example, I saw a survey from a partner last week that showed consumer preference for connecting with businesses using video has gone up 300% since January of 2020, which you'd kind of expect, given that here's how we're communicating today. So it just gives an idea of the rate of change and how it's actually accelerating, not decelerating. Let's flip ahead. Well, I thought this was an interesting chart to kind of accompany that data, though. So this is monthly contact volume from a Canadian bank, just a simple Canadian bank. So contact kind of volume change, it's a function both of new platforms and capabilities, like, chat and bots, for example, weren't really around 5 years ago, at least not in a usable form. But there are also segment changes going on. So if you look at this, most of the bank client contact in the Gen Z millennial segment is obviously online and mobile. And the segment is using these channels a lot, far more than the boomer generation. But that's just an insight into both segments and technology and kind of adoption changes are driving the type of volumes and contacts that we're seeing. To touch on that for a second too, when we think about, for example, chat and bots, just as an aside, we have some fairly new data in this space. And as Genesys, we're seeing that the actual largest population adopting chat and bot technology within financial services are actually a whole new segment. And it's a segment that were traditionally not contacting their bank or insurance company at all before the chat and the bot came along. So it's kind of interesting. those weren't always the reasons for like a CTO to put a chat and bot into their client experience platform. Usually it's for like call deflection reasons and cost savings. But it's just kind of interesting. Sometimes, we're seeing like new data that's just showing interesting trends emerging. Anyway, while all of these things are happening, just by the way, I thought I'd touch on this, there's an increasing wave of industry M&A. It's happening around the world. I just used a few US examples here, but the reasons why, of course, are the same. Regulatory costs, supervisory management costs are significant. The digital investments needed to be a deliverer of all these capabilities and new services is significant. And it's much easier to spread those costs over a larger base. Thus, there's a lot more merger and activity taking place today. And I just put in a quote from my old boss at JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon. He used to say, yeah, we buy a bank, we switch off the technology, save $1 billion straight away. So that was kind of that's just something else that's happening in the landscape as well as all these changes happening. So this is kind of a pivot point now. That's kind of general landscape point. And I thought it would be interesting to pivot to, well, how are we at Genesys kind of responding to all of these change stimuluses and what are we doing about it? So hopefully that makes some sense. So, we have a build. One more, there we go. So hopefully this slide kind of makes some sense. Bottom left is kind of where Genesys is coming from as a, how can I put it? When I joined Genesys, I'd heard of the company, and with my slightly limited banker lens, I thought of them as a back office client contact kind of call center technology company. And like many bankers, like my lens was correct, but not sufficiently wide, in that certainly Genesys do that. But of course, we've had to grow significantly as the meaning of how you connect with your clients has changed per these previous slides. So we've kind of changed beyond that point. We're now doing this kind of omni-channel contact center work as well. Now we're also moving, of course, and have moved significantly into the cloud space because, of course, it's much cheaper for our clients. It's more flexible. It's for most companies, the kind of future environment that they're building towards. So we're kind of moving through that cloud center journey and now into what we would call personalization. So you see this kind of flow and this development in terms of what we're bringing to market and even how we see ourselves as a company. And our CEO has said that basically he's looking for us to get to a point where we are providers of experience as a service. So that's where we want to go. So hopefully that makes some sense in terms of our strategy. Now, that journey is clearly super interesting for us. For many financial services companies, especially those with long histories, large recent M&As, many products, we could use maybe an Italian food analogy, and the tech infrastructure could oftentimes be described as spaghetti. So if you go with the cooking theme, our intent is lasagna, right? So layers of digestible technology, partners and capabilities designed together with native integrations. That's where we want to go, and we continue to add to that infrastructure, both in terms of partners, but also we're buying capabilities too. I mean, I highlighted in this lovely kind of Dutch orange here, like 3 recent acquisitions, 2 of which are about to close, 1 that has closed. So we're buying kind of targeted capabilities as well as partnering, and we think that's the future. And I thought it would be good just to touch upon cloud and Genesys services in the cloud. Now, if you've come across this before, you might think that, our cloud business, maybe it's just small financial services companies, maybe there's not very many of them. Well, that would be kind of incorrect as a view. Actually, we're getting to a level of maturity here, particularly in the financial services space. So 64% of our top 50 customers are multinational clients. Over a quarter of our cloud business is now financial services in terms of the client numbers. So we have hundreds of clients operating in this space. And we've got Genesys Cloud clients in 70 countries now. So, we have a ton of business here, basically. And of course, some of this business is really big and really complex. It's not just small kind of regional banks or insurance companies. BBVA, AXA, Vanguard, Itaú, Bradesco. I mean, these are major companies around the world. So we're doing some complex things with them. And in terms of what we're doing with them, I mentioned this a minute ago, where we're spending more time, we're spending a lot more time not talking about just contact center, case studies, but we're actually spending a lot of time moving away from it, let's enhance product X or Y. And we're refreshing a lot more of our focus around key moments of truth in the client journeys. And this is just one example I put in here for US life insurance companies. Basically kind of mapping out stages, where are the opportunities to like, where are the impacts of failure. And in fact, one of the companies we're buying, Pointillist, automatically does this journey mapping. Like it hooks into the data layer of a company. It maps out, I don't know if you're looking at something like emergency credit card replacement, like volumes associated with that, how often the credit card is not to your home address, etc. So it's fabulous technology that's really going to help us in the space of mapping out like where we want to find the most impact for improving client experience with their financial services provider. Let me switch gears even again to how we see some of the business models changing. Here's one model that's emerging from all of this change, getting away from a traditional contact center or client information being provided by snail mail or via a brokerage office or a bank branch. One model we see is this kind of experience center emerging and digital capabilities augmenting. And we work a lot now with partners. So e.g. with Adobe, we'll work to link marketing and customer service. With a company like FinAI, we focus on chat and bot deployments. That's the type of kind of frictionless, multi-channel experience that customers want from us. And I thought it'd be good to illustrate this, that there's no one correct model that's emerging from all of this change. So here's a couple of European bank examples. Now on the left, we have a simplified view of French consumer banks. Now basically in France, the model is we're keeping all of the branches, but we're changing the roles of the folks that are in them. And we're going to equip the branch personnel with new training, with connectivity technology, we'll put local humanity into the digital channels, etc. And there are many reasons for that, state, regulatory reasons, historical French reasons, but that's the French approach, that's what we're doing. Over on the right, there's a completely different model. So if you take one thing out of today, this is your German word of the day, Beratungscenter. This is Commerzbank in Germany. And their model is, well, we're closing a third of the branches. We're consolidating bankers, advisors, traditional call center agents into these banking or Beratungscenter. And my point here is it shows that our technology needs to be really flexible. No one of these models is right or wrong. They're just different. And the technology infrastructure that we need to serve up has to be flexible to do both. Now, let's start wrapping this up with a couple of visions of the future. Do remember that new innovations in financial services don't necessarily start in traditional places. Now, in this first example, this is a partnership on the left we've been working on delivering with NCR. And these are new interactive teller machines. So you kind of high-five the machine to authenticate, no card, no code. It just reads your palm print. Then if you need a live teller, banker, you press a button and they pop on screen. And if you want to say to them, please withdraw the daily or change the daily withdrawal limits, I need $10,000 right now for whatever purpose, they do that, away you go. And we've been live with this in the Middle East, in Bahrain, Dubai, and Saudi Arabia for a couple of years now. And we're introducing the technology with NCR to Commerzbank as well, with their new Beratungscenter approach. So super cool stuff. And coming to other early adopter markets shortly. And over on the right, this is an example from Turkey with ING. So behind single sign-on on the mobile app, if you need a live advisor to help you, say, finish buying 100 shares in company X, press a button, up pops a live advisor ready to help. So again, like just putting together humanity, technology, information all in one little bundle in the format and the form factor that clients like, I think is key. So I then have a couple of case studies to close out, and then I'm going to pass the microphone on. This first study is AXA in the insurance space. And rather than talk through it, let me just kind of hit a couple of points. So obviously one of the greatest challenges to digital transformation is simply scale, right? Like literally moving millions of customers and thousands of trained employees from one platform to another. It's a much larger task for a larger entity. So here's an example of a really large company moving to cloud. In this case, it's AXA. And a couple of points to note, we've worked really hard with them for over 3 years to get to this point, working across lines of business, working with different partners, in this case, Salesforce, to get this done. And that's pretty typical of what scale transformation looks like. Like, it does take time. It takes many partners, takes clear goals, budget certainty. It's just, there's a lot of tough sledding here. The slide makes it look very smooth, and smooth implementation is cool and fabulous. We like to talk about it, but there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes to make this happen. And finally, I thought I'd wrap up the presentation with a quick study from out of category. As I said, moving to cloud can be tough. It's much easier if you're an Uber and you have new technology environments. But I thought the key here was more the results for Uber, like 50% increase in self-service rates, 10% reduction in handle times, 15% telephony cost savings, so happier customers and a more efficient model. That just seems like a perfect place to end. So with that, I will stop, kill the screen share, and pass the baton over, I think, to Richard.
To me.
Sharon, over to you.
Yeah, thanks so much for those great insights, David. Before we hand over to Richard, I'm just going to run a quick poll for a bit of fun. Hopefully you can see it on your screen now. Would really appreciate your vote. If you were given a blank check to buy one new CX technology, what would you buy? Would you buy a cloud contact center solution, chatbot solution, speech and text analytics, feedback platform? Be really interesting to see where everyone's priorities are. I'll just give it a few more seconds so everyone will have time to place their votes. And then I'll share the aggregated results. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll and share those results with you. Hopefully you can see that on your screen. Quite a mix, and very interesting that the winner of the poll was the analytics, analyzing customer conversations using software to do that, followed by cloud contact center and knowledge management software. So thanks everyone for participating in that poll. Okay, now to our next presenter, Richard Fink, CEO at GSN, and also Paul Jones, Principal Business Consultant at Genesys. GSN is a Genesys partner and a leading Australian provider of contact center and customer experience solutions. And Richard is going to give us the Australian perspective on CX trends in financial services, based on a recent market research study many of you actually took part in. So take it away, Richard.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, David. I'm glad to see that poll kind of aligns with our survey, Sharon, otherwise we might be in trouble. Let me share. Let's get this part of the journey right. How does that look? All good. Full screen. All right. Good. Welcome, everyone. As Sharon said, I'm delighted to take you through some of the insights from our most recent survey, which only concluded a few weeks ago, which was really a look into the state of CX within an Australian context, within financial services. A little bit of a small plug about us, and we certainly don't have the logo credentials that David went through a short minute ago, but as Sharon said, we are a contact centre specialist. It's all we do. We've been working and collaborating with customers to deliver amazing experiences since 2003. We actually worked with Genesys back then to pioneer and bring the cloud contact center service into Australia. So as I said, we've had a long-standing relationship with Genesys. We do contact center solutions and IVR solutions, which kind of our history. But as Sharon's poll says, we integrate kind of the best global and the best local solutions together with the contact center stack. So we integrate through UC, so we can integrate your enterprise voice teams with your contact center teams, and we have a partnership with Microsoft. We do a lot of CRM integrations, whether that be Dynamics 365, Salesforce, or many other bespoke and customized CRM solutions. We talked just before about sentiment analysis. We have a couple of very key partnerships on AI-powered or automated quality management that can pretty much let you look at 100% of your customer interactions and get insights from them. Wouldn't be complete without best-in-class digital solutions. So we have a number of solutions around the virtual agent, the chatbot, the voice bot, and I probably omitted it, but moving much more into the social and the mobile application space at the moment. And then last but not least, customer feedback solutions, whether that be a simple customer survey or a purpose-built voice of the customer platform. Bit sad, Sharon, that no one voted for a customer feedback platform, but perhaps at the end of my session we can shed some insights. As I said, we've been around since 2003. We've worked with a lot of Australian, New Zealand's biggest brands. It's not a big list like David's. There's not 100 customers on here, but it's all we do in the local context. So enough about us. Let's get on to the report. The report, together with Genesys and Matchboard, we conducted a survey recently. It went out to a broad spectrum of financial services organisations across super insurance, banking, lending, wealth management, advisory. When we say a significant percentage of tier 1 and tier 2 participants, we estimate that was about half. So half the biggest financial services industry organisations within the Australian context participated. So it's a very good representative sample of what's happening at the moment. And then we actually used a research firm out of Singapore to create a report that's a bit tailor-made that we've shared with a few on this call, and we'll share with the rest of you post the call. The Australian context, not surprising to anyone, the rapid pace of acceleration into digital by consumers. This talks about pre and post COVID, but I think even without COVID, I think that acceleration would have been there, potentially not as strong. But this is quite consistent with the global context that David was talking about. What is quite surprising in this, and probably one of those interesting facts, is that the majority of Australian customers would actually use technology investment and innovation as a sounding board for who they actually form a relationship with. Now, you can imagine some of the younger generation doing this, but I think with the pace of change, and I think even to David's point, the local context. I mean, I know myself, I live in North Melbourne. We lost our bank a couple of years ago. Probably not too much of drama for the community, but our ATMs are also disappearing. So the move into digital channels is accelerating. That customer demand and that acceleration is really causing, in the Australian context, a lot of innovation, but a lot of disruption. I don't think the industry, and you guys live it more than I do, I don't think the industry has been through this much disruption in the last couple of years, as potentially the last 5 or 10 years. The emergence of new entrants, new fintechs, partnerships across traditional and new entrants, a significant amount of venture capital or capitals going into the market. So I think there's a very rapid state of flux. And as David said, we deal with new entrants and we deal with traditional, and it's a very interesting conversation to have across both. Look, this is a contextual slide as well. The investment or the response, if you like, from Australia's top 6 banks has been significant, a CAGR investment over the last 10 years of almost 9%. So the investment to keep on top of that and to keep the leading market position. But, if you have a look at it and you have a look at the return on equity, it is paying off. So the investment in new technology, in digital solutions is paying off at both the top and the bottom line for most of the large organisations. So where does that leave us at a broader market context? It's probably somewhat different to the big end of town. The majority so when we looked at the channels or the communications channels in use for customers, the majority of survey respondents still using phone and email. I was a little bit surprised about the high percentage of email as a channel for communications. But I wasn't surprised overall, because I guess that's where we've come from as a market, as an industry, as services to customers. What I was quite surprised about was only 28% of organisations have deployed live chat as the next best channel for customer communications. Live chat obviously is that first service that bridges between sort of traditional and self-help, but a fairly small percentage of adoption. And then next, the true self-service channels of chatbots/voice bots, mobile applications or mobile integration and social media integrations were very small and low on the list. So with so much customer demand for digital and self-help, it was a bit of a surprising picture to see. Not surprising to see phone number one, but fairly surprising to see the mix of the more digital and self-help channels being quite small in the overall scheme of things. Similarly, when we looked at how companies or organisations get customer insights or customer feedback, it's a similar picture, with email and online surveys being the dominant channel. So very traditional methods of engaging customer feedback, but also very low response rates and very low engagement from customers on that channels. We think in the context of the market, there are two big opportunities here. The first is really to use a more real-time customer feedback channel. And we know that using direct phone or text-based surveys, organisations can lift their participation rates above 30%. So therefore getting really good insights for their customers about what customers like, what they don't like, what their journey has been across multiple channels. And then I think the next one, and I think your poll bears this out quite significantly, Sharon, is the rise of AI-powered or automated sentiment analysis, where you can, essentially the old days of quality management, where you need to employ a team to look at a small percentage of your customer interactions are gone. Now you can use a software-based solution to look at 100% of your interactions and spare your teams to look at only those that are important. So you can get across pretty much everything. Now we think that both the customer engagement piece as well as obviously the interaction piece are very relevant, particularly in the context of the recent RG 271 legislative changes that came out on the 5th of October. So I think the ASIC chair was very forthright in urging companies to adopt technology solutions to get closer to their customers, to get more insights, to understand customer journeys, customer insights, customer complaints, and be able to respond more quickly. But we think this picture will move quite a bit in the next little while. So with that context, in terms of the here and now, where are companies looking to invest or spend their money? No surprises, and Sharon, thank you for your poll. Chat and voice bots were predominantly the number one, so increasing investment into self-service channels for customers bears out by customer demand. It bears out just by the pure economics of, as David, you rightly pointed out, getting good people and quality people is one thing on the agent or the employee side, and then responding to customer demand on the other side. And then what's absolutely key and critical is being able to integrate that together. The next from a survey perspective was that automated or AI-powered interaction piece. So being able to look across 100% of your customer interactions and understand, the good, the bad and the ugly of those interactions, understand what customers are happy, understand their sentiments, understand any of the complaints, and more importantly, through automation, rise those up to your quality management teams to go and have a look at that for, whether it be training purposes, coaching purposes, regulatory purposes, compliance purposes. The next on the list, unsurprisingly, those that haven't made the move to cloud will make the move to cloud in the next 2 years. Out of the survey, it was about a third of organisations hadn't made the jump yet. So unsurprising to see that next on the list. And again, probably not very surprising, but using more predictive CX tools to be able to create and design and personalise journeys for customers, whether that be across the web or just generically through chat and phone-based services, and being able to weave those experiences together and create a journey and create insights across the journey. So we're seeing a lot of action in that perspective. David, you touched on a lot of these in the global context. What are you seeing globally? Are you seeing very similar patterns, or different markets at different rates of adoption?
Yeah, it's super interesting, Richard. There are markets that are, if you like, I would say kind of ahead and of a slightly more kind of developed or mature kind of status that would change the data here. And there are others that are behind, absolutely behind. So on average, actually, if we took like a kind of a global average, this I think would look really close to it. It's super interesting. Like Australia is kind of like the litmus test here, and I think demonstrative of kind of where we are globally. Yeah, super interesting.
Unsurprisingly, the major reason for the investment is around experience. Now, whether that be customer experience, agent experience, or customer insights, I would group all these together. I mean, we've seen countless analytics that talk about the tie-in between agent experience and customer experience. So, 3 out of the 4 biggest factors for investment is around experience. Secondly, operational efficiency. I was a little bit surprised to see sort of compliance and some of the P&L attributes, or the direct P&L attributes, a little bit lower down. But I think given the people we went out to survey that are really tied into the experience of either their agents, their operations, or their customers, this is representative. And more importantly, we see about 3/4 of the participants making significant investments in these areas that we talked about before within the next 2 years. Probably lastly, a little bit of a surprise to me is some of the biggest challenge to adoption of some of these new solutions was perceived lack of budgetary allocations or budgetary support. We dug into this a lot more. What it really looks like at the heart is a lot of organisations find it challenging to create the case for change, or the business case for change, or justify a return on investment for the change. And it's potentially something that, at least from a vendor or a partner lens, we can help with. But yeah, most of these challenges really come out in terms of just being able to justify the expense. Probably the only other one that stands out there is some of the internal skill levels internally. But I think that with the adoption of cloud and the adoption of strong vendor roadmaps, that could be alleviated a little bit. Probably my last question for you, David. What do you say to customers that say that they don't have the budgets, or they can't work a return on investment for the spend required?
Well, I think there are a couple of points to it. I mean, one is folks have different approaches to this kind of budgeting dynamic, and we were speaking to a CTO at a very large North American bank that happens to have a stagecoach in their logo, right? Who would that be? And they're going for like a 3-year budget cycle within their technology function, so that they can actually have the conviction of every year they're not having to go back to the board for like approve our budget. They're going once with a really big number, approves for the next 3 years so we can get this done. So that's one approach to the budgeting. The second side to it, though, in terms of like, what do we say to folks? Well, it's really a cost or ROE question, right? And you might have a business model that says we're going to be the lowest cost provider, or I just can't afford to do much because I'm in a fintech startup mode. Well, it is what it is. For most companies, though, you would always look at ROE, because that's what analysts and shareholders look at, your ROE. And let's face it, that's really based on sustainable revenue growth. And your sustainable revenue growth is dependent on having great CX, positive brand attributes that come from that, and then just the traditions of any good financial services institution, like good products and services that are well priced, meeting clients' wants and needs, good risk management. So those basics don't go away, but that ROE kind of focus is how we respond to those observations. That's the key.
Terrific. Well, thank you, David. Sharon, that's it from the report. There's a bigger report, and as we said before, we'll make sure that we distribute it to those on this roundtable that haven't seen the report.
Fantastic.
I shall stop sharing.
Yep, great. So we just have 10 minutes for questions, and we've got a few that have come through already. So if I could just ask the speakers to keep their responses concise. So I'll read out the first one, which came from Gary at Australian Super. And this question's for David. Genesys' target of experience as a service has significant data dependencies. Most companies will work with multiple partners in the ecosystem they play in. Any thoughts on data enablement for your service vision, i.e. API enablement, i.e. how? Gary, I don't know if you want to turn on your camera and unmute to add to that.
No, you summarised it pretty well in terms of how you play in the ecosystem. It's a good vision. I was just curious about how much has been done on the execution part of it going forward.
Yeah, so I think the key, Gary, is, many tech companies can have cloud solutions. And at Genesys, we do have a Genesys cloud solution that brings our capabilities into a cloud environment, so no data center, real great. The real question, though, becomes, as we differentiate, what does a Genesys financial services cloud look like, right? And we had those kind of layered stacks on the chart that I showed, that shows in terms of like marketing engagement, what we do with Adobe in terms of, I don't know, X, Y, or Z. But you actually have to go a level down, right, into like the real nitty gritty of financial services. So, for example, authentication, right? I mean, that's really super important within financial services, far more so than healthcare, right? I mean, it's annoying if somebody steals your medical records. It's like an invasion of privacy. But it's not your retirement account. It's not your credit card. It's not like ruining you financially for the next 30 years. It's not as important, if I could say that. So the authentication experts in the space, you can go to companies like Pindrop, there are like Semantic out there, and then you've got to be looking for both. Well, we're looking for native integrations, and that native integration is super important. And if you don't have that, then you have a nice kind of API. But the native integration is super important. That's what a real ecosystem looks like. And I think we feel pretty good about where we are today, but there's always more to do. And there's more to do because you uncover more expertise. Back to my point about unexpected places, Israeli companies that do a fabulous job on data security. You've got to go talk to them. You've got to figure out what they're doing, and you've got to integrate. So yeah, we're rolling, but we're continuing to learn.
Great, thank you.
Okay, we had a question from Ben at UE Insurance. With advances in speech recognition and engagement tech like Alexa, Siri, and chatbots, how many years away do you think we are from customers being unable to differentiate between a real human voice and AI when interacting on a voice call? Richard, would you like to just give your quick view on that?
I think, Ben, I think you get the gold star for the question. It's a very good question. Look, I would say gut feel, and it always depends on the complexity. We've got customers doing some of it at the moment, and they're getting decent success rates, but they fall short and they don't have a fallback plan in terms of if the customer gets stuck where they get stuck to, but they're pushing the envelope. They're getting kind of an 80% on a very simple customer transaction, if that makes sense. I don't know, Dave, my gut feel is the simple stuff probably close to here and now, or at least the next 1 to 2 years. The really complex stuff, I think you could be 5 years out. But with most technology changes, you think it's going to go quickly. It goes a little bit slower than you think, but when you look back, it's actually gone quite quickly. So, you know, I think the simple stuff certainly is right here and now in the next year or two. The more complicated stuff, potentially 3 years out. David, gut feel?
I think there are 2 parts to it. One is the kind of natural language recognition, speech response, accent, tone, manner, etc. And I agree that's getting much, much better at a rate of knots. We'll get there super fast. I think the other part to it, though, is, if you like, the training. And if you say to Siri, like pick up your phone and say, Siri, should I include alternatives in my retirement investment allocation strategy for 2035? Try that with Siri. Siri doesn't know, right? Doesn't know. Now, to answer that question properly, of course, you need a whole bunch of other inputs and attributes to be answered. And we will get to that point where that becomes more seamless and you can do it with something that you think is a person that isn't. I don't think that's 2 or 3 years away, though. I think that's within the next, I don't know, 8 or 9 years, honestly.
Thanks, David. Question from Angelo at Honey Insurance. He asked David a question. I've worked with Genesys before, find it great for the team and customers. However, in his humble opinion, it was considerably more expensive compared to competitors and not quite as agile when implementing changes. How does Genesys Cloud change these to make it more attractive to a startup? And I know Honey Insurance is a fintech, an insurance tech that's growing fast, so that the solution is suitable for a startup fintech provider. So I appreciate the question, yeah, Angelo. Sure. Don't know if anyone from Genesys would like to address that one.
I'll take a first swipe, then Paul, I'm sure, has some thoughts. Look, the largest banks, insurance companies in the world, like JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, AXA, I mean, they've all been like these massive engaged prem Genesys users, because they're incredibly complex. And we've almost had to build from scratch each kind of iteration of their technology for each user. With Genesys Cloud, we don't. Back to Gary's question about kind of layers of technology. And of course, because it's cloud, there's no data center, it's much, much, much cheaper. So I would say that we have a really good solution. Go back to the kind of hero chart I showed in terms of the clients. And obviously that means on a rate card basis, we will always be competitive.
Thanks, David. And I did see on your client list a number of smaller startup-style Australian businesses in the fintech comparable space to Honey, I guess, that did find the Genesys solution suitable. So maybe it's a good opportunity to chat offline with Angela about that, perhaps Paul or Richard. There's a question from Karen at AMP. You shared earlier that the younger generation are contacting 2 times more than the other brackets. Is there further insight on this to be shared?
Well, I touched upon it in terms of like chat and bots, and the kind of population that's adopting the chatbot technology is actually greater than the kind of call deflection population that the CFO wanted to see. And my kind of analogy for that would be like, if you build another bridge linking Oakland and San Francisco, right? Are you going to halve the traffic volume on the Golden Gate Bridge? Well, no, you're going to find more users, more adopters, and we're finding more younger folks doing that. And of course, that's because younger populations, Gen Zs, millennials, are more used to Venmoing money, doing X, Y, or Z, opening new accounts with Uber or Lyft in the beat of the night. So they are just much more used to instantaneous response to what they would see as simple questions, but traditionally banks would think were more difficult. So that kind of like snappy kind of chatbot interaction works really well with those populations, and we'll see more and more and more of it coming, particularly to the earlier point, as those chatbots get better.
Thanks, David. And we have one final question from Angelo again about live chat. Having worked with integrated and authenticated human-based live chat before at 2 major banks and a major grocery chain insurance distributor, it 1, resulted in an increased customer traffic of about 15 to 25%, 2, reduced first point resolution, 3, did not improve NPS, and therefore 4, actually increased costs. 3 large test cases to reference with no benefit shown for human-based live chat as a channel. That was Angelo's experience. What is the case for implementing it apart from choice, which is theoretical in his opinion? So Richard, Paul, David, any of you like to comment on that? Or anyone from the audience for that matter, like to comment on their experience if they've had a different one?
Angela's got the hard questions today. We've certainly seen some evidence of point 2, Angela, in terms of, I think, first call resolution on some of the self-service channels has got a long way to go. Fairly much consistent with the conversation we had about voice recognition technologies, which means designing the end-to-end service with the agents is critical. But we've also seen, for example, in super, where people in Australia were allowed to withdraw $10,000 of super, we've seen chatbots be able to deflect a lot of the simple inquiries and in fact save a number of contact centres in a number of organisations. So I think, like your other question, some of this is kind of horses for courses in terms of the customers, the transactions, the interactions. We're dealing with a large student body at the moment, and they're doing asynchronized messaging, and they're getting fairly good results. But I do think it's kind of fairly subjective.
Mm.
Just another thought to add to that, which is slightly an adjacent thought, but I think it's important too, and it's kind of generational as well. I was talking to an senior executive at Amazon last year, and his perspective was, here at Amazon, we view a phone call into us as a defect. Right? You should be able to do everything for yourself. And it's kind of interesting. If you think of your own ordering online experience, you're like, yeah, it is. So that kind of all-pervasive market-moving power of an Amazon is influencing how we view and how we want to have interactions across the board. And I think it does impact the results that Richard was just answering.
I noticed Lisa from one of the banks has implemented live chat and would like to swap notes with you, Angelo, maybe afterwards. But actually, it's come to the time where we have to pick the best or most interesting audience question. And I'm going to give that honour to Paul Jones at Genesys, who's been lurking quietly in the background, to announce the prize winner.
Well, it's a bit sad to be referenced as lurking, but I think the question that was referenced as well was the gold star standard. I think that was Ben in terms of the future of AI and conversations. So I nominate Ben from UE.
Okay, Ben from UE. I'll be in touch with you, Ben, to arrange delivery of your bubbles. And just very quickly, Richard, I believe you have a slide you wanted to share with some information about next steps people could take if they were interested.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Paul and I put our heads together, and what we thought is obviously we'd love to continue the conversation, but the best way to do that would be either via a free CX workshop to help you understand the business case, understand your requirements, delve a bit deeper into some of the areas and some of the topics we talked about today. So we're offering a free 2-day or 2 workshop package. And then secondly, flying on from that, a cloud trial where you can effectively get hands-on, use it, see the different environments, see the user interface, understand how the channels work together and integrate. And we can even work with you to step that from in terms of an agile implementation from trial, build it out into production. But certainly I would be encouraging everyone to start with the discovery workshop. I think there's a lot of questions that we can answer through that.
Thanks, Richard. Sounds like excellent value. So that unfortunately brings our event to a close. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for your time. I'll send around a short survey as always to get your thoughts. The GSN team remain available to engage further, and I'll share their contact details on the survey. I also encourage you to reach out to any of the speakers if you have further questions or would like to connect even on LinkedIn. Wishing everyone a wonderful day ahead. Stay safe, stay well, and see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, cheers, guys.